I'm Ryan Cobourn. I'm a senior design manager at Adobe. I work on our data and analytics products. This is my team. So we have 7 designers in Utah. We have 2 in New York. Actually, the second one is joining on Monday. And then we have 2 in Noida, India. And I'm going to talk about the role of design managers in product teams. But before I get into the weeds on that, I want to get into some other weeds. So this is my house. We moved to this house in 2015. We actually built it. I didn't used to live in a suburban monstrosity. But my family was expanding. We needed a bigger space. And before it was a house, and you can't see it at all because picture is washed out, it was a hole in the ground. And before it was a hole in the ground, it was this wild hillside over in Draper. To give you an idea of just how wild it was, here's a fox sauntering through my backyard. We've also had deer, gophers, voles, snakes. I found a black widow sauntering through my kitchen the other night like it paid rent. Now, when you build a house, the builder doesn't typically finish off a bunch of stuff unless you overpay them to do it. Landscaping is one of those things. So I decided to hire a professional landscaper to finish off like the front yard, because we had to, and like the flat parts of the backyard, basically where there was going to be grass. And I thought, I'll come up with a plan for this hill later on, and I'll save some money in the process. So I read a bunch of articles, I watched a bunch of YouTube videos, which basically makes me a professional landscaper. I built this sweet sprinkler manifold that I think is a work of art. And once I had cleared the hillside, I planted trees and shrubs. I put in drip lines. And all I needed to do was put down like 5,000 square feet of mulch at a 3-inch depth. Now, if you've ever put down mulch, you know not to do it yourself because it's like back-breaking labor, right? So I called up my landscaper and I was like, yeah, dude, can I get a quote to like throw some mulch down on this hillside? And he comes back at me with like $4,000, right? And I'm like, no way, I guess I'll do it myself. So after a few months, my beautiful hillside looked like this. It turns out I was right about not wanting to spread mulch. And I really had no idea how much these weeds that I had removed were gonna like the irrigation system I put in. So now I'm fixing to pay my landscaper a whole bunch more than $4,000 this coming spring to come in and fix this catastrophe. So that experience to me is a lot like design management, because in order to successfully complete a project, you need to have a vision. You need to have a plan, which I obviously didn't. Really importantly, you need to have the right people to execute on those things, which I really didn't have that. And you need to have a clear end goal. You need to know where you're going with this thing, right? And just throwing trees and shrubs down on the hillside is not a very clear end goal. So I'm going to be talking about what is a design manager, how do we plan design work, hiring and managing designers, creating a design vision, and your path to design management. If you're here, I assume that you're either looking for a career in design, or you're interested in becoming a design manager, or you are a design manager and you want to hear how badly other people are doing it to make yourself feel better, which is good, you've come to the right place. Oh, I'm sorry. No, I'm in the right place. Okay, so first thing I want to talk about is what's a design manager? So Wikipedia has this nice, soulless definition. Design management is a business discipline that uses product management, design strategy, and supply chain techniques to control a creative process, support a culture of creativity, and build a structure and organization for design. I much prefer Jared Spool's definition that he had in an article that he recently published. He said, good managers ensure the team has everything they need to get the job done. They shield the team from distractions that might come from others, while ensuring each team member is given a chance to do their best work. I agree with that. I often define my job as being attending meetings professionally. But really, this is my definition of what a design manager is. Design managers are the enablers and shepherds of design in an organization. We democratize user focus and enable design leadership. Some of our job is tactical, managing process and people. Much of it relies on soft skills like risk mitigation and evangelism, empathy, domain knowledge, and strategic vision. And we use those skills to create what we call a sphere of design influence inside of our organization and our community. I'm going to talk more about spheres of influence later on, but first I'm going to tackle the more tactical aspects of the job. The thing I want you all to remember as you're listening to this is there's no secret ingredient. There's no right way of doing things, right? I'm going to present some things that have worked for me at Adobe and in Adobe Design. Your mileage may vary. So the first thing I want to talk about is how the sausage gets made, planning design work. So let's talk about prioritization and assigning stuff. Now, here's a problem that I have. Typically, for every one designer that I have working on stuff for a roadmap, I have 3 people trying to cram stuff onto that roadmap and bickering with each other about whose stuff is going to go on and whose stuff is not. Some of that stuff is big and some of it's small, and sometimes we don't know what's going to be on the roadmap for next year until it's like the end of this year. It's not happening right now, though. So we think we should have this nice, predictable stream of work as the year goes through, right? And we think, okay, we can allocate our resources, we can move things around a little bit, but these products are going to have a nice, steady stream. But because of all those people trying to get stuff onto the roadmap, it quickly becomes this unpredictable mess. People who are assigned to specific work streams are underutilized, and their coworkers are like way maxed out because of the stuff that they're working on. And we realized that part of that problem is actually how we organize as a team. So we're allocating designers to product areas and roadmaps, and it leaves them at the mercy of the ebb and flow of the product team. So we're working towards a new model. In that model, there are senior designers with areas of expertise related to a domain space and the personas that are in that space. The rest of the team becomes a little bit more flexible, contributing to projects as needed. This also gives us a model of prioritization. If a project obviously impacts the success of our users, we know design can have an influence on the outcome of the project, so we want to allocate people to that. So now we've solved our problem. Well, not necessarily. It doesn't always translate to like a perfect world. Like sometimes we're still overutilized and sometimes we're still being underutilized. But we've become a lot better at managing it, right? And it gives us space to do things like personal projects and things that we're interested in. So design work gets done in design sprints, maybe in your organization. But here's what our process looks like as it relates to design sprints. And you may all know, if you're doing design, getting design to be agile is a little bit of a struggle by its nature, because design has to consider what came before and what comes after, right? It can't be broken into discrete 2-week chunks that can be, hey, we started it, hey, we're done, right? So this is how our process plays out over the cycles of a project. It's important to note here that we don't commit ourselves to being completed on something in a single sprint. We recognize that projects have to move forward, right? We have to make progress, but there's not a sprint for research. There's not a sprint for wireframes, et cetera. Engineers would love that, but we have to kind of set expectations. So if you're trying to do this, you may be familiar with something similar, a view like this in Jira. So this is our Kanban board. And everything on this Kanban board sort of represents things that people on my team are working on and what stage of that design process that I just showed those things are in, right? And the key here is we're not forcing these things through the sprint process, right? Now, we do have like a Scrum board that does that, right? But it's a lie, because they don't get shifted. They just get shifted from one sprint to the next as we continue to work on them. So rather than making our team use a specific process and saying, hey, you gotta knock this stuff out in 2 weeks, we're saying, hey, let's make this work for our team as a team of designers. And that's a big chunk of what I consider the design management role to be. One other thing you'll see on here, I don't know if anyone else is doing this, is we have our own design issue, right? And again, that kind of goes to that flexibility of being able to keep our stuff in our realm without anybody getting worked up by the fact that, hey, is that issue ready to be handed off to engineering? Well, here's your engineering issue, and if you need to start doing API work for that, start doing API work for that. We're still working on the designs. They're related to each other. Sometimes these issues are blocking epics and roadmap issues, but but they get moved through our process as needed. And as our program manager, our illustrious program manager, Amy Atkins, likes to say, this whole thing is one step towards having a common language with the engineering and product teams, and that's the chicken nugget of success. So, let's talk about hiring and managing people. And for this, I'm actually going to do an interactive game. So I need a volunteer from the audience, somebody who's not on my team, who is like a quarter of the room in here. So anybody? Yes, come on up. Thank you for raising your hand. It's going to get real awkward there. So what's your name?
It's Christian.
Christian. Christian. Okay, where do you work, Christian?
It's at Best Company.
The Best Company?
The very best company.
That's awesome. And what's your role there?
I'm the user experience design director.
Oh, so you're a design manager? This is cheating. Okay, so we're gonna play a little RPG. And here's our scenario. So you are the newly hired design manager at a startup and you're designer number one. The company has given you 100 gold to hire a designer. The money can pay someone of a certain skill level in various categories. We're gonna fill some of those categories out. So here's our character. We're gonna call her Blahar. She is a totally made up person. Do not look around the room. Okay, Christian, we've got 100 gold, 10 gold can buy a skill point. Where do you want to allocate your skill points for this new hire? And I'm gonna have to take my presentation down to do this, but you just tell me as we go through this. Here, you can see it right here. So where do you want to put them? Yeah, you got 10.
2 on design.
Okay.
4 on
Problem solving, I like that. Go big or go home, problem solving. Okay. You are at 8, so you have 2 more. You got speed, relationships, and research left.
Okay, so I'm going to do 1 on speed, 1 on research.
That's it. You want to change anything?
No.
Okay. All right. So let's take a look here. Let me just make this visible. This monitor. One other little thing. All right. Okay, so here's Blahar, your new hire. So, our first challenge, we need to develop a design system for all of our products before we begin designing optimal workflows. Your boss, probably. Well, you are the boss, so maybe not you. Okay, so here are your options. If you put 2 skill points on speed, you can develop the primary style and tone yourself and use Blahar to develop out the components with your review. It's not an option. Second option, if you put 2 on tools, you can leverage an existing system-like material for Bootstrap, but we'll put our own style and tone on it. Use Blahar to develop out the components. You can review them. Third option, hit the button one more time. Prototyping. 5, definitely don't have that. But we could have Blahar implement an existing system like material for Bootstrap or whatever, and actually work with the UI team directly to help launch it. Or if you put 3 on relationships, you could leverage Blahar to develop the basic components of the system with your guidance and have her work on the UI team. So, because you only got 2 on tools, that's the only one you have the option to do. I think you did a good job though. I'd be pretty stoked on that, especially if I was a startup. Maybe not if I was the best company, but if I was a startup. Okay, awesome. Hey, thank you so much, Christian. Everybody give him a big hand, big round of applause. You got him in trouble. That's what you get for standing up here, just so you know. Okay, I'm gonna do one more. So over time, your mentoring and management of Blahar is helping her grow. You have gained experience points. You have 5 experience points, so you have 50 skill points, 5 more skill points that you can add, 50 gold. So I need another volunteer. We're gonna do this again. I have another mint truffle. Yeah, all right, see? What's your name?
Paco.
Paco.
Yeah, Paco.
Paco. Are you in Chris Perry's class at U of U? Okay, awesome. So Chris works for me. He also teaches a class in the multidisciplinary design program at the U of U. I'm going to talk about him later, mostly in a good way. Do you currently work, Paco? Or are you just a full-time student?
Full-time student, but I work at this makerspace in Provo.
Okay. What do you do there?
Basically run the laser cutter and all the other heavy machinery and things like that, and do design work there too. So.
Nice. So it's fair to say you have no design management experience?
Yeah, it's fair to say.
Okay, awesome. This is going to go good. Okay, so we have 5 more skill points to allocate here, Paco. Where do you want to put them? So the question is, how do you define evangelism, which is an excellent question. Evangelism is the ability to go out and sell your ideas internally and externally at your organization. Pretty valuable. You want to do 2 evangelism? Okay, yes, I like it. Okay, you got 3 more. 2 for relationships. 3 for relation. Okay, that's it. Okay. Let's see how it goes. All right, so thanks to Paco's amazing design management, Blahar has gotten to be very good at pitching her ideas internally and externally at the company. And she has also gotten really, really good at forming relationships with cross-functional teams. That is a very important skill for a designer to have. So, we now need to turn our marquee product into an extensible platform. This could be a multi-year design effort. Your boss, probably. Okay, so if Blahar has 4 skill points on research, she can conduct a series of customer and user interviews to form a set of user personas to better understand the bigger picture about this thing. That'd be fun. If you have 5 on relationships, you can work with Blahar and your cross-functional team to develop a strong vision for the platform and have her execute the design work and prototypes with engineering. If you put 3 on evangelism, like what you did there, work with Blahar to come up with a design vision and take it on a roadshow around the company and sell it to everyone. Or if you have 5 on problem solving, you can have Blahar take a shot at the core problems that need to be addressed prior to kicking off with the cross-functional team. So let's just revisit what we have here. Make sure we know what we got. So I think our only option is to go down the evangelism road. It's a good road though. I think it was an excellent choice. So, hey, thank you very much, Paco. You might want to let this one sit in the freezer for a little bit before you eat it, or squeeze it in your mouth. Big round of applause for Paco. So, the point of that, as dumb as it may seem, is that the choices that you and your employees make in terms of growing their careers are going to have a big effect on their ability to jump into the projects that you both need to work on and how much direct management of those projects you're going to be doing as their manager. So next thing I want to talk about is attracting and managing employees. And these are some of the aspects of our workplace culture that affect the satisfaction of our team, but also has a splash effect on the rest of the organization in the form of higher quality working relationships, trust, and the value placed on the partnership they have with the design team over time. Let's talk about attracting. The recruiting and hiring process is really, really important for getting the right talent on your team. External evangelism also plays an important role in creating excitement about your team and informs potential candidates of how your company views design. We also want to reflect our values in the hiring process, both as a design team, but also as a company. We want the experience to be genuine, diverse. We want the candidates to meet people with different approaches, different ways of thinking, who also represent our people diversity. Ultimately, we want every candidate that we bring in to have a great experience, whether they end up being hired or not. Also, when we're building our teams, we want to be cognizant of how each person contributes to the culture of our team. People can sense the vibe, when they come in and spend time with your team, even during an interview process. And I often, when I'm having one-on-ones with candidates, they comment on it. They say, hey, this seems like a great team, or they say, hey, you guys are like a bunch of weirdos. I'm not sure if I want to work here. And also being involved in communities, here we are, outside of our organization helps to extend the center of gravity of design beyond the sort of traditional design networks, right? So we're not just pitching work and pay when we're hiring at Adobe. We're pitching our team and the culture of the company as equal selling points. So let's talk about developing. They say the grass is greener where you water it. We want to put our team in a position to learn and grow as they do their job, and letting them lead design conversations with cross-functional stakeholders and others builds character, confidence, and domain knowledge. So we want to lead through design. We also want to help designers identify their paths for growth. So sometimes that can come in the form of training and development, like speaker training, which helps people become design leaders who can bring the organization along with them as they're selling design. Feedback is super important for designers who want to grow. I emphasize giving feedback as close to the moment that we can give the feedback as possible, whether during a design review or individually right after a meeting if you want to pull someone aside. Taking the time to talk through designs and the work and the person are really our key opportunities to mentor and develop the designers on our team. And finally, we want to create a self-sustaining cycle for all of that by encouraging a culture of open design. An open design culture is one where the ideas are encouraged and built upon. We all share in the success or failure of the work, and we share the learnings from those experiences to grow as an organization. As the old aphorism goes, a rising tide lifts all boats. Our role as design managers is to mentor our employees and to engage with other teams in our organization in order to achieve that. Let's talk about retaining. So life satisfaction and job satisfaction are closely coupled with each other, and it actually runs in both directions. So people who are dissatisfied in their personal life also tend to bring that dissatisfaction into work and vice versa. So fostering a work-life balance helps improve employees' attitudes towards both of those things. It should not, however, be an effort to recreate a life for people at work at the expense of their personal time. We're also working in an environment with remote and extended teams. We want to grant flexibility to work with time zones, personal schedules, life events. As long as work can get done, it doesn't really matter where it's happening. And measuring success is important too. It's part of our DNA in the Experience Cloud at Adobe, but giving designers insight into the success of their work as it enters the customer's workflow creates a sense of investment that's really difficult to replicate with a pat on the back for delivering something on time. Now, I know you're probably going to say, hey, Ryan, I don't have enterprise analytics implemented on my products, and that may be true, but it's important to share the positive and critical feedback that you get no matter what avenues it comes from. Positive customer testimonials, improved NPS scores, social media chatter, all of those things help measure the success of a project and give feedback to the people who work on it. Also having meaningful career conversations. So career conversations should be consistent. They should be focused on a designer's goals and ambitions. These are some of the questions that I like to ask and revisit with each of these conversations, which I try my best to have quarterly with each employee. So what are your long-term 5 to 10 year career goals? What are your short-term 6 to 12 month career goals? What type of work are you most excited about? Research, visual design, going to meetings. What do you need from me in order to be successful? And one of the most important questions is, what can I do better? We should always be asking for feedback about how we can do our jobs better. And sometimes it's not enough to ask that question. Sometimes you have to ask specific questions to get to the heart of what you're doing and what you're not doing, because it can be really hard and it can also be really intimidating to give your boss feedback. So recognizing people. Calling out individual success is another really important management tool. We like to make announcements that span the design org. We also like to get these things syndicated out to our partners across the business. And recognizing the team as a unit is another way we can call out success. We want to build the bonds between people so they function better as a group. All right, I'm going to jump subjects again. I'm going to talk about creating design vision, which is about democratizing and shepherding design. So design as you may know, is pretty unique among other business functions in that we can very quickly help visualize what others might kind of feel or sense, but they can't quite explain it in a way that people can easily digest it. I love this quote. Again, I'm sorry it's so washed out. It's from my boss, Phil. And he said, our job is to work together to realize something we can each imagine, but we can't articulate alone. So recently, well, not recently, for the last 2 years, my team's been working on a project that we call the data platform, the Experience Cloud Data Platform. It's a huge, sprawling project. And 2 years ago, we had started working on V1 of it, and we got that thing all the way to beta with internal customers. And it wasn't until then that we realized that we had built completely the wrong thing. Made a lot of assumptions, ran with them. Those assumptions turned out to be wrong. We never vetted them. And from the point that we defined the requirements to the point that we put it into a beta environment, we were wrong. So earlier this year, we blew that up and we said, okay, we're not doing that anymore, get it out of here. We're gonna start this thing over. But in the process of doing that, somebody threw out a date and said, we're gonna do it by this date, March of 2018. And that is not always a great way to start a big sprawling design project. So we just kind of started working. Requirements came in, the requirements were kind of suspect, but we worked on them anyway. And really what happened was there was a lot of conflict happening between the product management team, between design, engineering, between product management and engineering. And really it was because none of us knew where we were going. We didn't have a vision, we didn't have a plan, we didn't know our end state, where we were gonna be in March of 2018. So last month, we got all of the kind of directors and senior management level people and designers on my team together in a room in San Jose, and we were just like, let's tackle this thing together. So the first thing that we wanted to do was create a set of shared design principles. Shared design principles give the cross-functional team a reference point that they can look back on with everything they're doing to refer to the vision. From the time that we kind of develop them until the implementation of the actual work. So we talk about things like approachability, continuity, context, accessibility. Everyone forgets about accessibility. The next thing we wanted to do was gain a shared understanding of our personas. So humanizing and recognizing personas, especially recognizing them together rather than individually, allows us to refer back to them and their unique needs as we discuss the viability of different approaches to different things that we're designing. And then once we have principles and a shared understanding of our personas, we can start talking about their story. And this story is intended to help us understand the context of the user's experiences, both inside of our workflows and outside of them and with each other. So here's our North Star. This is what it looks like. It's not usually this blurry. I blurred it out so you can't see it because it's secrets. But it's a single story that describes all of our personas, their relationships with their workflows, with each other. And this is our central talking point. This is the thing for a project that's gonna allow us to focus the conversation about the business's strategy, the technology, and the things that we're building on our users. Did you get a good picture? That's why I blurred it out. Yeah, and if you want any content from this, I'll put my email up here later. I'm happy to share. So the next step is really going out and evangelizing that work. So we want to get out there and we want to talk about it in team meetings and leadership meetings and company meetings in front of customers, in front of all of you. And this is one of the ways, coming back to it, that we create those spheres of influence for design in our organization. So did any of that sound good to you? Maybe not, maybe. If it did, here's some things that you might want to consider on your path to design management. First and foremost, I think that you need to know your strengths and your weaknesses. One of the ways that you can get to know this is by asking yourself some kind of revealing questions. Am I comfortable being the person guiding the work instead of doing it? Can I let other people take credit for the success of the work? Can I take responsibility for failure, even if the failure wasn't mine? What are my opportunities for growth? What do I need to learn? When you ask yourself questions like these, you have to be super honest with yourself. Self-awareness is a major personality trait that design managers need to possess. Now, not everyone necessarily knows that they're self-aware or not. Being honest with yourself and talking about what you don't know and where you have to grow is a great first step. The second thing I think you need to know are the strengths of other people. So this is from that same Jared Spool article. I really like this. Smart design managers will make this one of their primary missions. They'll identify the individuals in their team who have an inkling of vision and grow them into a solid design leader. Design leadership works best when it's an intentional act of the design team's management. So how about avoiding pitfalls? There are some really common pitfalls that we all have to learn to avoid. Now, yours are going to probably be different than mine, depending on your company and your unique situation. But these are some of the ones that I have come across. So sometimes the task that we're being asked to perform feels impossible. The design work isn't catching with the company. The company is making short-term decisions at the expense of a longer-term strategy. It's important to never give up. Persistence in design is usually rewarded. It's also important to create a high standard of design and to reinforce that standard often. It may sound a little counterintuitive, but actually designers are more satisfied with their work when they feel that they're able to hold each other to a higher standard. The bonus is, when we've achieved a higher standard, we can usually hold the teams that we work with to that standard as well. So, hey, engineering team, could you try a little harder to make sure that the UI actually looks like my mockups, and no, things being 8 pixels out of alignment isn't looking like my mockups. Failing to prioritize your time is another common pitfall. Once your calendar fills up with meetings, one-on-ones, travel, reviews, reading and responding to email and Slack, etc., you can feel like there's no time left to accomplish anything. The challenge here is to prioritize your time where it'll have impact. And in doing that, to make sure that you're not shortchanging your team out of your time, since they're your most important resource. They're the ones doing the work. Also, don't let imposter syndrome get the best of you. When you're surrounded by smart people who are doing great work, and especially when your work is no longer as visible as it once was, it can be really easy to start to feel like you don't know what you're doing. Everyone feels this way in their career at some point. It's totally normal. Another thing, a normal reaction to it is to over-dictate people's work and take credit for it. And this can have a huge negative impact on the team's morale. Something to be aware of. So, oh God, that pink just does bad things on this. So this is an example, though, of the design career paths at Adobe. It's important to know that these aren't one-way paths, right? The concept of a design lead is actually a sort of try it before you buy it for management, right? It gives people the opportunity to do some of the leadership and tactical management work stuff without committing to a career of managing individual people's careers and growth. Finally, remember, I'm pulling for you, and we're all in this together. Before I wrap up, I do want to put out a shameless plug. Chris Perry's is presenting tomorrow at 1 o'clock. Every designer is an analyst. He's an awesome presenter. It's going to be great. You should absolutely go. Thank you. Questions? Or you're like, it's 3:56, I'm out of here. That was a lot of information. Okay, your hand went up slightly first, Paco.
I'm just curious to know, like, your personal, like, what led you to where you're at right now?
So the question is, what led me to where I'm at right now? A series of serious life mistakes. That's a really great question, and I appreciate it. So I joined Adobe in 2010. So a little bit of history for anyone who doesn't know it. There was a company in Utah called Omniture. Omniture was founded by a couple of folks here in Utah County, and they were all about basically digital web analytics, right? Adobe bought that company in 2009, right at the end of the year. And I joined as a designer in 2010. I used to work at backcountry.com, which is an e-commerce company over in Park City. And I work for the lovely Indian lady in the fourth from the back row, and I have had the luck to work for such an inspiring and intelligent person for the last 7.5 years. And she basically made me become a manager. Now, you know, our team was 5 people when I joined. I was the 5th. And we knew that we were in for a few years right after the Adobe acquisition of explosive growth. And we needed people who were ready to step up and hire and manage, because Archana, as good as she is at her job, couldn't do it all by herself. And I heard the call and I stepped up. The benefit that I had in doing that was I actually got to do design work for many years after. So I got to work directly with my designers, I got to produce designs. And it really kind of let me, again, that try it before you buy it thing, it really let me kind of taste what management was, while still feeling like I was doing the thing that I really enjoyed, which was design work. So that's really how I ended up here. And as my team has grown, my ability to sit down and fire up Adobe XD and knock out mock-ups and prototypes has kind of shrunk. But I design a lot of posters for company events and things like that, so that keeps me happy. Did that answer your question? Yeah. You had a question?
So when setting up a design team, so like in your early example, it's like you have your one design manager, right? So when hiring your initial staff, how do you balance like the personal evaluation of where your skill set is, and then balancing that with what the actual team needs are, and then what the company's actually set up to deal with? For a specific example, in our case, like when we initially set up our like UX department, one of the people they hired was like a PhD in user research, and we had absolutely no ability to utilize that.
Yeah, that's a really, really great question. And hiring the right people with the right skill sets, and I know my little RPG game probably didn't give it the weight that it's due, is actually probably the hardest thing, right? Because there's 3 things we're looking out for. What do we need right now? What are we going to need out of this person in a couple of years? What skill sets do we already have that we need maybe either reinforcement on or don't need reinforcement on? Hey, we're good on visual design, thanks very much. We're good on PhD researchers for sure. And then, you know, what are our big gaps? What are the things that we're not very good at? So I'll give you an example early in our team building, along with Archana, was we recognized that we had acquired a bunch of companies, and every single one of the UIs of our products looked like totally different. Like one of them was purple, and one of them was green, and like one of them was orange. And I mean, from one to the other, the only thing that was consistent was there was an Omniture logo in them. And so we recognized the need really early on to have like a system design person. We were like, we just don't have that. Archana is an architect by trade. My background was more in like interaction design and information architecture. And we had some people with solid visual design skills, but we didn't have anybody who could do like this system. So we hired a guy named Alan Wilson. We actually hired him as a contractor at an agency to like fix our icons. And if you went to his talk this morning, I think he talked about that a little bit. It's a great talk. If you haven't seen it, you should watch the video. But we hired him as a contractor, and we said, hey, make all our icons consistent. So he went and did like a survey of all the icons. And he was like, all right, here's all the things that mean these things, but you're using different icons for it. And here's now a new set of designs. And we were like, yeah, that's what we needed. So we hired him away from where he worked at. And that was just, you know, we recognized that as being just a total gap in the skill set of our team. Now, the second part of your question was, what about the way your company is set up? And our company at the time was not set up to take advantage of the work that Alan was doing. So he came up with a design system, which we called Adobe UI, and the intent was that we could apply it across all of our products. It's still green, so that was probably never gonna happen, but the intent was there. And people sort of did it, but different engineering teams with different kind of KPIs and responsibilities were like, no, we're not gonna do that, or we're gonna half-ass it. It really wasn't until like the last couple of years that, you know, Alan being persistent and like us kind of like evangelizing and going out and trying to develop a design system has really caught on. So sometimes you're not set up to do it, and you have to like find places to apply those people's skills while you get the steam and the momentum going on those things. I hope that was a good answer to your question. I rambled a lot, so we can always talk about it more later if you want to. The room is dwindling. The only people here now are the people who Chris is grading their papers at the end of the semester. Any other questions?
You talked a lot about your team, like working together in a centralized way, and there's a lot of FaceTime between designers. I'm in a situation in which designers are embedded in other teams, and so the centralization is a little bit different. Like we kind of have to put in a lot of effort to make sure we maintain design culture in a centralized place. I didn't know if you had any thoughts about kind of the pros and cons of that, or any experience dealing with one or the other.
I have some experience with that. Yes, that is a really, really good question. So this is one of the things that tugs at organizations, especially as they grow. You have product people and engineering teams, and the trigger phrase for me is my designer, my developer, right? They want that person there in their team, and do you know why? It's about control, right? So design is an early device for establishing vision and direction. It's something you can put in someone's hand and they can show it its power and its control over the roadmap. So when you're in an immature organization or an organization that's growing really fast, they really like to do that, right? So when we were at Adobe, powered by Omniture, which is what it was called right when I joined, shortly after the acquisition, we were actually our own team of 5 people. But there was a team of people, they were called XD, this was before the product XD, and they were from Macromedia, and there was like 100 of them. These designers that had been, in various parts of Adobe, and before them, before the Macromedia acquisition, there had been a group of Adobe designers who were a little bit more like research focused. And so they had all been slowly subsumed, but we resisted. We fought the good fight because we believed in designing specifically for our business unit. We believed that our business unit was so different from the rest of the organization that we didn't fit in with them. And it wasn't until 2013, Archana, that we finally got reorged into that organization. So it had been 3 years of resistance, which turned out to be futile. And the way that we worked with them during that time was really to form kind of relationships with key people around the things that we knew were important. So the design system was one of them. There were some things about like pattern libraries and the kind of the underlying development platform that was underlying our design system, right? So we worked real closely with them on that, and we formed close relationships on that. And what ended up happening was when we got subsumed into their organization, it became then a question of like, how do we get the Creative Cloud, the Document Cloud, and what was called the Marketing Cloud at the time to all like look the same and feel the same to our customers, because we want to sell all 3 to big organizations. And what we ended up doing, and it only happened recently, was we created like a design lead in each one of those areas. So we call them a consistency lead, and Alan Wilson, whom I mentioned, is one of the consistency leads, and they're sort of people on like principal track, so high-level individual contributor track, and they all put on like robes and like candelabras and go down in a dark room and they talk about the design system and who's not obeying the design system and who is obeying the design system and who's cheating and making up their own components. But that's one way to do it. I think the relationships are the thing that matter the most. I think that if you know who those designers are, which can also be a challenge, get together periodically and talk about the challenges of the design that you're doing in your organizations. And kind of a parable to union organizing. Like demand. If you think it's valuable to have a central design org, demand to be a central design org. That doesn't mean you'll report to GM or VP of design. Even we still technically report to the guy who runs our digital media side of our business, not the digital marketing side. But we're embedded with them. They're our friends. We like them. So we make that relationship work. So again, happy to talk more about that. Let's go. Thank you.